The morning rush at Sunrise Diner always started the same way. The smell of fresh coffee filled the air as Lily Chen balanced 3 plates of steaming pancakes along her arm. She moved with practiced grace between the crowded tables, dropping off orders with a genuine smile that reached her eyes despite her exhaustion. "Here you go, Mr. Parker. Extra syrup, just how you like it," she said, placing the plate in front of a gray-haired man who'd been coming in every Tuesday for as long as she'd worked there. "You're a lifesaver, Lily," he replied, already reaching for the coffee cup she refilled without being asked. Lily had been working at the diner for almost 3 years now. Her co-workers and regular customers knew her as the reliable waitress with the quick laugh and endless patience. What they didn't know was that her fingers, now wrapped around a coffee pot, had once danced across piano keys at one of the most prestigious music schools in the country. When the lunch crowd finally thinned out, Lily leaned against the counter, massaging her lower back. Her boss, Rita, a tough but fair woman in her 50s, slid a plate of fries toward her. "Eat something. You've been on your feet since 6 this morning," Rita said, her voice gruff but concerned. "Thanks," Lily replied, realizing she hadn't eaten anything since the toast she'd gulped down before her shift. "I'm pulling a double today. Need to cover my rent." Rita frowned but didn't say anything. She knew Lily's situation better than most. 3 years ago, Lily had been months away from graduating from the renowned Carson Music Academy when her father had a stroke. With her mother long gone and no siblings to help, Lily had dropped everything to care for him. The medical bills had drained their modest savings, and her dreams of becoming a concert pianist had been packed away along with her sheet music. "You know, we still have that old piano in the back room," Rita mentioned casually, wiping down the counter. "From when this place used to do those Friday night music things. Probably needs tuning, but it's just gathering dust." Lily's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. "Maybe someday I'll take a look at it," she said, knowing she wouldn't. Playing again would hurt too much. By the time her second shift ended, the night had fallen over the city. Lily's feet ached as she walked the 5 blocks to her apartment building, a faded brick structure that had seen better days. She climbed the 3 flights of stairs, too tired to be annoyed about the perpetually broken elevator. Her apartment was small but clean. A single room with a kitchenette in one corner, a bed in another, and a bathroom so tiny she could barely turn around in it. But it was what stood against the wall that made the place feel like home. An upright piano, old and scratched but perfectly in tune. It had been her grandmother's, and it was the one thing Lily couldn't bear to sell, even during the worst financial times. She dropped her bag by the door and kicked off her shoes. Her father had passed away a year after his stroke, and while the grief had softened, the weight of abandoned dreams had not. Lily opened the window slightly, letting in the cool evening air and the distant sounds of the city. She washed her hands, scrubbing away the smell of diner food, and changed into comfortable clothes. Then, almost like a ritual, she sat at the piano. She didn't turn on the lamp. The streetlight outside cast enough of a glow through the window. Her neighbors would be home by now, but Mrs. Wu next door was hard of hearing and the family above worked night shifts. The walls were thin, but nighttime was when she could play without worrying too much about disturbing anyone. Lily placed her hands on the keys, feeling the familiar cool ivory under her fingertips. She started softly, playing a simple melody she'd composed years ago. As her fingers warmed up, the music grew more complex, flowing from her soul rather than from memory. This was her real voice, the one that remained silent during her long shifts at the diner. Her playing was interrupted by 3 gentle knocks on the wall. Mr. Zhang, her elderly neighbor, on the other side. Unlike most in the building, he was always awake late into the night. The first time he'd heard her play, she'd been terrified he'd complain. Instead, he'd knocked afterward and called through the wall, "Beautiful. Please, play more." Since then, their wall knocking had become a kind of conversation. 3 knocks meant he was listening and enjoying. Lily smiled and continued playing, shifting into a piece by Chopin that she knew was his favorite. As she played, she allowed her mind to drift back to her days at the academy. The practice rooms with their perfect acoustics, the pressure and joy of preparing for recitals. Professor Nichols with his stern expression that would soften whenever a student truly connected with the music. "You have a gift, Lily," he had told her once after she performed a particularly difficult piece. "Don't waste it, but life had other plans." When her father's health collapsed, there had been no question about what she would do. Family came first. It was how she'd been raised. The academy had been understanding, offering to hold her spot, but after her father died, the mountain of medical debt made returning impossible. Lily's fingers slowed, and the music became softer, sadder. She had applied for scholarships, looked for sponsors, but nothing had materialized. The classical music world was small and competitive, and 3 years away had made her virtually forgotten. Another series of knocks came from the wall, this time in a questioning pattern. Mr. Zhang's way of asking if she was okay when her music turned melancholy. Lily knocked back twice, their signal for "I'm fine," and shifted to a more upbeat melody. She played for another hour, losing herself in the music until her fingers finally tired. Before going to bed, she placed her hands in a bowl of warm water with Epsom salt, a trick she'd learned at the academy to prevent cramps and care for her hands after long practice sessions. Her phone buzzed with a message from Rita. "Need you to come in early tomorrow." Tanya called in sick again. Lily sighed but texted back her agreement. More hours meant more money, and the electricity bill was due next week. She set her alarm for 5 a.m. and crawled into bed, her mind still filled with music. She dreamed of standing on a stage, a grand piano before her, the audience silent as they waited for her to begin. In her dreams, she never had calluses from carrying heavy trays. Her hands were smooth and perfect for playing, and she wore a beautiful dress instead of a diner uniform stained with coffee and grease. The next morning came too quickly. Lily's alarm blared at 5 a.m. and she forced herself out of bed, her body protesting the short night's sleep. As she showered and dressed for work, she hummed the piece she'd been playing last night, her fingers unconsciously mimicking the movements on imaginary keys. The diner was quiet when she arrived, the morning light just beginning to creep through the windows. Rita was already there, counting cash from the previous day. "Thanks for coming in early," Rita said, looking up briefly. "The delivery truck is coming at 7 and I need someone to sign for it while I go to the bank." "No problem," Lily replied, tying her apron around her waist. She started the coffee maker and began setting up for the day, her movements automatic after years of the same routine. By 7:30, the morning regulars started trickling in. The businessman who always ordered 2 eggs over easy with wheat toast. The nurse coming off the night shift who wanted pancakes and the strongest coffee possible. The college students with their laptops who would nurse a single cup of coffee for hours. Lily knew all their orders by heart. She asked about their families, their jobs, their classes. She remembered their stories and their preferences. To them, she was just friendly Lily the waitress, reliable and kind, always ready with a refill or a listening ear. None of them would ever guess that the woman who brought them their breakfast had once performed Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 at a student showcase attended by some of the most respected musicians in the country. None of them knew that the hands that set down their plates could create music that had once made people cry. As the morning rush intensified, Lily pushed thoughts of music aside and focused on the job at hand. There would be time for dreams later, in the quiet of her apartment with only Mr. Zhang and her old piano as witnesses to what might have been. For now, she had orders to take and customers to serve. The secret musician would remain hidden behind the friendly smile of a waitress, at least for a little while longer. The rain came down in sheets, drumming against the windows of the Sunrise Diner. It was a Tuesday evening, typically slow even in good weather. Lily wiped down the counter for the 3rd time, glancing occasionally at the clock. 3 more hours until closing. Rita emerged from the back office with a worried look. "The weather report says this storm's going to get worse before it gets better," she said, peering out at the nearly empty street. "If no one comes in the next hour, we might as well close early." Lily nodded, secretly hoping they would. Her shoulders ached from a double shift the day before, and the thought of getting home early enough to play for more than just an hour made her heart lift. The bell above the door jingled, and both women turned to see a man rush in, shaking rain from his coat. He was tall with salt and pepper hair, wearing an expensive-looking suit now spotted with raindrops. Lily hadn't seen him in the diner before. She knew all the regulars. "Looks like we've got at least one customer," Rita muttered, then called out, "Sit anywhere you like." The man chose a booth by the window, setting down a leather briefcase beside him. Lily grabbed a menu and a pot of fresh coffee, making her way over to him. "Evening," she said with her usual friendly smile. "Coffee?" The man looked up, seeming distracted. "Yes, please. And thank you for being open. My driver's taking a detour around some flooding and I needed somewhere to wait." As Lily poured his coffee, she noticed his hands, long-fingered and graceful, with neatly trimmed nails. Piano hands, her old professor would have called them. A gold wedding band gleamed on his left hand, and an expensive watch peeked out from his sleeve. "The special today is turkey meatloaf," she said, setting down the menu. He glanced at it briefly. "Just coffee for now, thank you." Lily nodded and returned to the counter. The man pulled out a tablet from his briefcase and began scrolling through something, occasionally making notes with a stylus. Every so often he would stare out the window at the pouring rain, a slight frown on his face. An hour passed. A few more customers came and went, a couple of college kids seeking refuge from the storm, an older woman who ordered pie and ate it slowly while reading a paperback novel. The man in the booth remained, ordering a sandwich and more coffee as the evening wore on. Just as Lily was wiping down tables in preparation for closing, the phone at the counter rang. Rita answered it, her expression growing concerned. "That was Tom," she said after hanging up. Rita looked at the clock and sighed deeply. "He can't make it in tonight. His car broke down in this weather." Lily looked confused for a moment, then remembered. Tuesday night was when Tom, a local piano player, came in to play for the dinner crowd. Not that there was much of a crowd tonight, but still. "We'll just have to go without music tonight," Rita continued. "Not like we've got many customers anyway." The man in the booth glanced up at the conversation. He followed Rita's gaze to the small stage in the corner where an upright piano sat, its surface gleaming under the soft lights. Lily hadn't even noticed it earlier. She always tried not to look at it too much. "You have live music here?" the man asked, seeming surprised. Rita nodded. "Tuesday and Friday nights. Nothing fancy, just some background piano to class up the place a bit." She shrugged. "But our guy can't make it tonight." The man turned back to his tablet, and Rita headed into the kitchen. Lily continued cleaning, trying to ignore the piano that now seemed to be calling to her from across the room. She hadn't played in public since leaving the academy. The thought made her palms sweat. The bell jangled again, and a group of 6 people hurried in, laughing and shaking off raindrops. "We finally found somewhere open," one of them called out cheerfully. "Our reservation at Bellini's got canceled because of a power outage." Rita emerged from the kitchen looking both surprised and pleased at the unexpected business. As she led them to a large table, Lily heard her apologize for the lack of their usual Tuesday night music. "That's a shame," one of the women said. "We were hoping for a nice cozy dinner with some atmosphere to celebrate Diane's birthday." Rita hesitated, then turned to look at Lily with an expression that made her stomach drop. "Lily," Rita said, "didn't you mention once that you played a little piano?" The silence that followed felt deafening to Lily. She could feel her cheeks growing warm as several pairs of eyes turned toward her. It's been a long time," she stammered. "Just a few songs," Rita pressed. "Nothing fancy. Just to give the place some atmosphere for these folks." The man in the booth was watching her now too, his head tilted slightly with curiosity. Lily felt trapped, her heart pounding. She hadn't played for anyone except Mr. Jang in 3 years. What if she froze? What if her skills had deteriorated more than she realized? "Please," the birthday woman asked. "Even just a song or two would be lovely." Lily looked at the piano again. It wasn't anything special, not like the grand pianos at the academy, but it was well maintained. Tom made sure of that. Her fingers seemed to tingle at the thought of touching keys that weren't her own worn ivories at home. "Okay," she heard herself say, as if from a distance. "Just a few songs." Rita beamed at her and hurried to take the group's drink orders. Lily wiped her suddenly damp hands on her apron and slowly walked to the piano. She sat down on the bench, adjusting it to her height, and stared at the keys. White and black, the same as any piano, yet somehow intimidating in this public setting. She started with something simple, a jazz standard that Tom often played. Her fingers were stiff at first, hitting an occasional wrong note that made her wince. But gradually, as the music flowed, she felt herself relaxing. The diner sounds faded away. The clink of silverware, the murmur of conversation, the rain beating against the windows all became background to the music. When she finished the first song, there was a smattering of applause from the birthday party. Encouraged, Lily moved into another piece, this one with a livelier tempo. She played a few more standards, songs that anyone might know, careful not to reveal too much of her classical training. But as the evening wore on and the rain continued to pour, something shifted inside her. The birthday party was enjoying their meal, engaged in conversation but occasionally pausing to listen more intently when she began a new song. Rita was smiling more than Lily had seen in weeks, and the mysterious man in the booth had set aside his tablet, his attention now fully on her playing. Almost without conscious thought, Lily's hands began to move into a different piece, one of her own compositions. It was something she'd written during her final year at the academy, a piece that wove together her love of classical structure with more modern influences. The melody started softly, almost hesitantly, before building into something richer and more complex. She closed her eyes, letting the music take her. For a few precious minutes, she wasn't Lily the waitress anymore. She was just a musician, speaking the language she knew best. When she opened her eyes again at the end of the piece, she was startled to find the diner completely silent. The birthday party had stopped eating, all eyes on her. Rita stood behind the counter, dish rag frozen in her hand, and the man in the booth was staring at her with an expression of utter astonishment. Feeling suddenly self-conscious, Lily quickly transitioned into a popular song from the radio, something light and familiar. The spell broke. Conversation resumed and Rita went back to her tasks. But the man in the booth continued to watch her, his coffee forgotten. After another half hour, Lily finished with a gentle, quiet piece, another of her own compositions. The birthday party applauded warmly, and one of them slipped a generous tip into the jar that Rita had placed on top of the piano. "That was wonderful, dear," the birthday woman said as they prepared to leave. "You made our evening special despite the rain." Lily thanked her, feeling a curious mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. She hadn't played for this long in ages, and certainly not for an audience. Her fingers were tired, but in the good way she remembered from her academy days. As she returned to her waitressing duties, she noticed the man in the booth had gathered his things. He approached the counter to pay his bill, glancing at her with an intensity that made her nervous. "Excuse me," he said as she rang up his order. "That last piece you played, the one before the pop song, what was it?" Lily hesitated. "Just something I wrote a while ago." His eyebrows rose. "You composed that?" She nodded, wishing the credit card machine would process faster. "And where did you study?" he asked. When she looked surprised, he added, "It's obvious you've had classical training." "It doesn't matter," Lily said, handing him his receipt. "That was a long time ago." The man reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the counter. "My name is David Winters. I'm the director of the Metropolitan Symphony Orchestra." Lily froze, her hand hovering above the card. "We should talk," he continued. "Someone with your talent shouldn't be hidden away in a diner. No offense to this establishment." Before she could respond, the door opened again, and a man in a chauffeur's uniform entered. "The car is ready?" "Mr. Winters," he said. David nodded, then turned back to Lily. "Think about it." He gestured to the card. "My cell number is on there. Call me." And then he was gone, disappearing into the rainy night and leaving Lily staring at the small white card on the counter. Her world suddenly tilted on its axis. Lily stood frozen behind the counter, staring at the business card as if it might burst into flames. The door swung shut behind David Winters, but his presence seemed to linger in the diner. "Who was that?" Rita asked, coming up beside her. "He left you his card?" Lily picked up the card with trembling fingers. It was heavy cardstock, embossed with gold lettering. "David Winters, Director, Metropolitan Symphony Orchestra," along with phone numbers and an email address. "Nobody," Lily said quickly, tucking the card into her apron pocket. "Just a customer." Rita raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. "Well, whoever he was, he left you a $50 tip. And the birthday group left another $60 in the jar. Not bad for a rainy Tuesday." Lily nodded distractedly, her mind still reeling. The Metropolitan Symphony was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the country. She dreamed of attending their performances as a student, saving up for months just to afford the cheapest seats. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. By closing time, the rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the streetlights. Lily helped Rita close up, her body going through the familiar motions while her thoughts remained scattered. "You were amazing tonight," Rita said as they prepared to leave. Why didn't you ever mention you could play like that? Lily shrugged, avoiding eye contact. It never came up. Never came up? Rita laughed in disbelief. Lily, that wasn't just playing a little piano, that was… Well, it was something special. Thanks, Lily mumbled, pulling on her jacket. See you tomorrow. The walk home felt longer than usual. Lily's hand kept drifting to her pocket, touching the edge of David's card as if to confirm it was real. By the time she reached her apartment building, her mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. Mr. Zhang must have heard her come in because 3 gentle knocks came through the wall as she hung up her coat. Usually this was her signal to play their nightly ritual. Tonight, though, Lily couldn't bring herself to sit at the piano. Her fingers had done enough talking for one day. She knocked back once, their code for not tonight, and fell onto her bed fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. What was she even considering? Calling a stranger who'd heard her play for a few minutes and thought he knew her? She'd left that world behind years ago, and not by choice. The classical music scene had a short memory, and hers would be a story they'd heard before. Promising student disappears, talent wasted. Besides, what could he possibly offer her? A chance to audition for the orchestra? She was rusty, out of practice for serious performance, and even if by some miracle she got in, orchestra musicians didn't make much, especially newcomers. How would she pay off her father's remaining medical bills? Lily pulled the card from her pocket and held it above her, studying it in the dim light from the street outside. Then, with a sudden decisive movement, she reached over and dropped it into the trash can beside her bed. Fantasy over, she muttered, turning onto her side and closing her eyes. But sleep didn't come easily. In her dreams, she sat at a grand piano on a vast stage, the spotlight hot on her skin. David Winters watching from the front row with that same intense expression he'd worn in the diner. Morning came too soon. Lily dragged herself through her shift, making silly mistakes she hadn't made in years. Forgetting orders, spilling coffee, giving customers the wrong change. By lunchtime, Rita was watching her with concern. "Are you feeling okay?" she asked as Lily leaned against the counter, rubbing her temples. "Just tired," Lily replied. "Didn't sleep well." Rita studied her for a moment. "This is about that man from last night, isn't it? The one with the card." Lily started to deny it, but found she didn't have the energy. "Maybe. What did he want?" Lily hesitated. "He's with the Metropolitan Symphony. He heard me play and thought I should, I don't know, do something with it, I guess." Rita's eyes widened. "The Metropolitan?" "Lily, that's huge." "It's nothing." I threw his card away. "You what?" Rita looked genuinely shocked. "Why would you do that?" Lily felt a flash of irritation. "Because it's not realistic. I have bills to pay. I can't just drop everything and chase some music dream that didn't work out years ago." "Who said anything about dropping everything?" Rita asked, her voice softening. "But turning your back on a connection like that without even seeing what it might lead to? That doesn't sound like you." Before Lily could respond, the lunch crowd began arriving, and they both had to get back to work. But Rita's words echoed in her head throughout the afternoon. By the time her shift ended, Lily had made up her mind. She would dig the card out of the trash when she got home, call this David Winters, and politely explain that while she appreciated his interest, she wasn't in a position to pursue music professionally. It would be a brief, courteous conversation that would put an end to the unsettling feeling that had plagued her since last night. What she didn't expect was to find David himself sitting at the counter when she emerged from the back room after changing out of her uniform. He looked up from his cup of coffee as she approached, recognition flashing across his face. "Lily, right?" She nodded, suddenly tongue-tied. Up close and in the daylight, he looked even more imposing than he had the night before. Distinguished, confident, the kind of person who moved through the world knowing exactly where he belonged. "I was hoping I'd catch you," he said. "I realized after I left that I didn't properly introduce myself or explain why I'm interested in your playing." Lily glanced around the diner. It was the slow period between lunch and dinner, with only a few tables occupied. Rita was nowhere to be seen, probably in her office doing paperwork. "Mr. Winters." "David." "Please." "David," she corrected. "I appreciate your interest, but I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm not looking to return to music professionally." He raised his eyebrows. "Return? So you were professional before?" Lily hesitated, realizing her mistake. "I was a student at Carson Academy." But that was a long time ago. Carson? David looked genuinely impressed. That's one of the best music schools in the country. What happened? The bluntness of his question caught her off guard. Life happened, she said shortly. Family responsibilities, bills, reality. David nodded slowly. I see. And does reality include wasting extraordinary talent? Because that's what I heard last night. Extraordinary talent. Lily felt a flush of anger rise to her cheeks. You don't know anything about me or my life. You heard me play for what, half an hour? And you think that gives you the right to waltz in here and judge my choices? I'm not judging your choices, David replied calmly. I'm questioning why you're not making new ones. Because not all of us have the luxury. Lily's voice rose, drawing glances from nearby customers. She lowered it again with effort. Not all of us get to follow our passions without consequences. Some of us have responsibilities, debts to pay, real-world problems that don't disappear just because we can play Chopin. David set down his coffee cup. Is that what you think a musical career is? Some frivolous pursuit for people who don't have real-world problems? Do you have any idea how hard most musicians work? How many sacrifices they make? Of course I do, Lily shot back. I was one of them, remember? I practiced 8 hours a day. I missed holidays with my family to prepare for recitals. I lived on ramen noodles to save money for master classes. And then when my father got sick, none of it mattered. The music world kept spinning without me. A silence fell between them. David studied her face for a long moment. What's the real reason you won't consider coming back? He asked quietly. Is it pride, fear? The question hit too close to home and Lily looked away. I have to go. My shift is over. She turned to leave, but David's next words stopped her. The piece you played last night, your composition, it was remarkable. Raw in places, but the structure, the emotional narrative. It reminded me of why I fell in love with music in the first place. Lily looked back at him, caught off guard by the sincerity in his voice. I'm not offering you a spot in the orchestra, he continued. That's not what this is about. I'm offering you a chance to be heard. The symphony is hosting a community showcase next month. Local composers presenting original works. It's not glamorous, no pay. But there will be people there who matter in the industry. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another business card, setting it on the counter. You can play your own piece. Just that one performance and then decide if you want to walk away again. The offer hung in the air between them. One performance. Her music, not someone else's. The thought made Lily's heart race. I can't, she said finally. I haven't performed publicly in years. I'm not ready for something like that. The showcase isn't for 6 weeks. That's plenty of time to prepare. I work double shifts most days. When would I practice? David shrugged. That's for you to figure out. If it matters enough, you'll find the time. His casualness about her very real constraints rekindled Lily's anger. That's easy for you to say. You don't know what my life is like. You're right, I don't, he conceded, standing up and leaving money for his coffee. But I know what I heard last night. And I know it deserves to be shared with more than just diner customers on a rainy evening. He gestured to the card on the counter. The invitation stands. Think about it. This time when he walked out the door, Lily didn't remain frozen in place. She snatched up the card, intending to tear it to pieces. But something stopped her. The same something that had made her fish the first card out of her trash can that morning before work. Rita emerged from the back office, eyebrows raised. Was that him again? The orchestra man? Lily nodded, still clutching the card. And nothing, Lily said firmly, though she slipped the card into her pocket instead of destroying it. He wanted me to perform in some showcase. I said no. Rita studied her face. Did you, though? Really? Lily didn't answer. She couldn't because the truth was she hadn't said no, not completely. And the realization terrified her more than any performance ever could. For the next 3 days, Lily did her best to forget about David Winters and his showcase offer. She worked her shifts, smiled at customers, and went home to her small apartment. But each night as she sat at her piano, her fingers betrayed her. They kept returning to the piece she'd played that rainy night, her composition, working through sections, refining transitions, imagining how it might sound on a better instrument. David's business card sat on her nightstand. She hadn't called him, but she hadn't thrown the card away either. It was like a splinter in her mind that she couldn't remove. On Thursday evening, a week after her confrontation with David, Lily was surprised to find Rita waiting for her after her shift ended. "Got plans tonight?" Rita asked, jingling her car keys. Lily shook her head. "Just the usual. Why?" "I want to show you something. It won't take long." Curiosity got the better of her, and Lily found herself sliding into the passenger seat of Rita's old sedan. They drove in silence for about 20 minutes, leaving the familiar streets of Lily's neighborhood behind. When Rita finally parked, they were in front of a community center, its windows glowing warmly in the evening darkness. "What are we doing here?" Lily asked as they approached the entrance. Rita just smiled. "You'll see." Inside, they followed the sound of music down a hallway. Rita stopped at a doorway and gestured for Lily to look in. The room contained about 15 people of varying ages, from teenagers to senior citizens, sitting in a circle with instruments, a mix of violins, cellos, flutes, clarinets, and an upright piano in the corner. "It's the community orchestra," Rita explained quietly. "They meet twice a week." Lily watched as the group worked through a piece, stopping and starting, laughing at mistakes, encouraging each other. They weren't professionals, that was clear from the occasional wrong notes and uneven timing. But there was joy in their playing, a genuine love for the music that transcended their limitations. "My nephew Alex plays cello with them," Rita said, pointing to a young man with glasses. "He works as an accountant during the day, but this," she gestured to the room, "this is what keeps him sane," he says. Lily felt a tug of recognition. She understood that feeling all too well. "Why did you bring me here?" she asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. Rita turned to face her. "Because I wanted you to see that there's a middle ground, Lily. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, giving up your music entirely or becoming a professional musician. There are other ways to keep music in your life." They watched for a few more minutes before quietly slipping away. On the drive back, Lily remained silent, processing what she'd seen. "Alex told me they're always looking for new members," Rita said as they neared the diner, "especially pianists. Their regular one just moved to Arizona." Lily stared out the window. "I'll think about it." But it wasn't the community orchestra that occupied her thoughts when she got home that night. It was David's showcase. The community orchestra was safe, comfortable, a place where mistakes were accepted, where music was a hobby rather than a calling. The showcase was something else entirely. It was a step back into the world she'd left behind, a world of high expectations and fierce competition, a world where she once belonged. Lily sat at her piano, fingers hovering above the keys. Then, with sudden determination, she began to play her composition from the beginning, really focusing on each passage. As she played, she made mental notes. This transition needed work. That melodic line could be stronger. This section should build more gradually. When she finished, there were 3 knocks on the wall, Mr. Zhang's signal of appreciation. But tonight, they were followed by 5 more rapid knocks, his way of asking for an encore when something particularly moved him. Lily smiled and played the piece again, this time experimenting with some of the changes she'd been considering. The next morning, she called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years. Then, heart-pounding, she dialed the number on David's card. "Winters speaking," came his clipped, professional tone. "This is Lily from the diner," she said, her voice steadier than she expected. There was a pause, then his tone warmed. "Lily, I'm glad you called. About the showcase," she said quickly before she could change her mind. "I'd like to know more details." She could almost hear him smile through the phone. "I was hoping you'd say that." They arranged to meet the following day at a coffee shop near the Symphony Hall. Lily spent the rest of the day alternating between practicing her piece and wondering if she was making a huge mistake. When she returned to work the day after, Rita took one look at her and knew something had changed. "You're doing it, aren't you?" The showcase, Lily nodded, unable to suppress a small smile. "I'm meeting with David today to discuss details." Rita gave her a quick hug. "Good for you. And don't worry about your shifts. We'll work something out." The coffee shop where Lily met David was nothing like the diner. All sleek lines and minimalist decor, with classical music playing softly in the background. David was already there when she arrived, reading something on his tablet. "Thank you for coming," he said, standing to greet her. "Coffee?" Once they were settled with their drinks, David got straight to the point. "The showcase is in 5 weeks on a Sunday afternoon. Each composer gets 15 minutes to present their work. Some bring their own musicians, others perform themselves. I'd perform my own piece, Lily said. It's written for solo piano, David nodded, making a note. Perfect. The audience will be a mix. Music lovers from the community, some critics, representatives from music schools, and a few key people from the industry. Lily felt her stomach tighten. What key people? Recording company executives, some private patrons who fund new composers, and the director of the new artist program at Westridge Conservatory. Lily nearly choked on her coffee. Westridge? As in the school that offers full scholarships to composers? David's eyes sparkled. The very same. Jane Thompson, their director, is an old friend. She's always looking for fresh talent. The implications weren't lost on Lily. A scholarship would mean a chance to complete her education, to pick up where she'd left off years ago. This is a lot more significant than you made it sound at the diner, she said slowly. David had the grace to look slightly abashed. I didn't want to overwhelm you. And honestly, I wasn't sure you'd even call. They spent the next hour discussing logistics. Lily would need to submit her composition title and a brief bio for the program. She would have access to the performance space, a small recital hall adjacent to the main symphony hall, for 2 rehearsals before the event. What about the piano? She asked. What will I be playing on? A Steinway Grand. Not the newest, but well-maintained. Lily nodded, trying to hide her excitement. She hadn't played on a proper grand piano since leaving the academy. As they prepared to leave, David hesitated. There's one more thing. The piece you played at the diner, it's good, Lily, very good. But if you're willing to put in the work, it could be exceptional. What do you mean? I mean that with some refinement. Strengthening certain sections, perhaps reconsidering some of the harmonies in the middle passage. It could really stand out. I'd be happy to offer some guidance if you're interested. Lily felt a flicker of defensiveness, but she pushed it aside. This was what she'd always wanted at the academy, mentorship from established musicians who could help her grow. I'd appreciate that, she said finally. But it's still my piece. My voice. Absolutely, David agreed quickly. I wouldn't want to change that. Just help you make it shine. They arranged for her to come to his office at the Symphony Hall the following week. As Lily walked back to the bus stop, her mind was already racing with possibilities. 5 weeks wasn't much time to polish her composition and get her technique back up to performance level, especially while still working at the diner. When she got home, she called Rita. I need to cut back my hours, she said without preamble. Just until the showcase is over. Rita didn't hesitate. Done. Tell me what you need. Really? Just like that? Lily, I've been running this diner for 25 years. I've seen people come and go, most of them just passing through on their way to somewhere else. You're the first one I've met who was heading somewhere better but got stuck here instead. I'm not going to be the thing that keeps you stuck. Tears pricked at Lily's eyes. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just promise you'll still play for us sometimes, even when you're famous. Lily laughed. I promise. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Lily worked mornings at the diner, then spent her afternoons practicing and refining her composition. Once a week she met with David at his office, playing her piece for him and discussing possible improvements. Their sessions were intense. David didn't sugarcoat his feedback, pointing out weaknesses and pushing her to dig deeper, to find the emotion at the core of her music and bring it to the surface. Sometimes she left feeling frustrated, other times exhilarated, but always with new ideas to explore. Her hands, which had grown accustomed to carrying plates and wiping tables, rediscovered their old strength and flexibility. The calluses from waitressing gradually gave way to the familiar smoothness of pianist's fingers. At home, Mr. Zhang became her most loyal audience, listening through the wall as she practiced late into the night. Sometimes he would knock 3 times after a particularly good run-through, his silent applause. 2 weeks before the showcase, David invited Lily to observe a symphony rehearsal. She sat in the empty hall, watching as he worked with the orchestra, his movements precise, his ear catching the slightest imbalance or imperfection. Seeing him in his element, she understood better why he'd been so insistent about her music. He lived and breathed it just as she once had. After the rehearsal, he introduced her to several of the musicians. They were warm and encouraging when they learned she would be performing in the showcase. David doesn't sponsor just anyone, one of the violinists told her with a wink. If he believes in your work, it must be special. The pressure was mounting, but so was Lily's confidence. Her piece was transforming under her hands, becoming more nuanced, more truly her own. And somewhere along the way, a dream she'd tried to bury had reawakened. The night before her first rehearsal in the recital hall, Lily stayed up late, making final adjustments to her composition. When she finally went to bed, exhausted but satisfied, she realized something. For the first time in years, she felt like herself again. Not Lily the waitress, but Lily the musician, the person she was always meant to be. The morning of the showcase arrived with golden autumn sunlight streaming through Lily's apartment window. She had barely slept, running through her piece in her mind all night. Now, as she made her coffee with slightly trembling hands, the reality of what lay ahead hit her full force. In just a few hours, she would perform her music, her own creation, for an audience that included some of the most influential people in the classical music world. The thought made her stomach twist into knots. She sat at her piano intending to run through the piece one last time, but her fingers hovered above the keys without pressing down. She was afraid to play it now, afraid that it wouldn't sound as good as it had last night, afraid that she would discover some glaring flaw she'd somehow missed during all those hours of practice. 3 gentle knocks came through the, "Well, Mr. Zhang checking if she was awake. I'm up," she called, though she knew he couldn't really hear her words, only her voice. A moment later, there was a knock at her actual door. Lily frowned, not expecting anyone this early. She opened it to find Mr. Zhang standing there, a small elderly man with kind eyes and a gentle smile. In all the years they'd been neighbors sharing music through their wall, they'd only spoken face-to-face a handful of times. "Mr. Zhang," she said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" He nodded, holding out a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. "For today," he said, his English heavily accented but clear. "Good luck." Touched by the gesture, Lily invited him in and carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside was a delicate wooden box. When she opened it, a beautiful sound filled the room. A music box playing a classical piece she recognized immediately. Debussy's Clair de Lune. "It was my wife's," Mr. Zhang explained, his eyes growing distant with memory. "She was pianist too. In China long ago. When I hear you play First Time Through Wall, I think of her." Lily felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you. This means so much to me." Mr. Zhang smiled and patted her hand. "You play from heart. Always most important thing." He pointed to the music box. "Bring with you today, for good luck." After Mr. Zhang left, Lily sat with the music box, listening to its gentle melody until it wound down. She tucked it carefully into her bag, alongside the sheet music she wouldn't need but brought anyway as a security blanket. Rita had insisted on driving her to the recital hall, and at noon, they set off. The diner staff had made a small card wishing her luck, signed by everyone. Lily kept it in her pocket, a reminder of the unexpected support she'd found in a place she'd once thought of as just a job. "Nervous?" Rita asked as they neared the symphony hall. Lily nodded, unable to put into words the storm of emotions inside her. Fear, excitement, hope, and something deeper that felt like coming home. "You're going to be wonderful," Rita said confidently, "and whatever happens today, I'm proud of you for doing this." The recital hall was smaller than the main symphony space, but no less intimidating, with its perfect acoustics and rows of seats for about 200 people. When they arrived, David was already there, speaking with a small group near the stage. He spotted Lily and came over immediately. "There she is," he said warmly. "Our hidden treasure." Lily introduced him to Rita, who sized him up with a look that clearly said, "Don't you dare let her down." "The program has you performing fourth," David explained. "About 45 minutes into the showcase, there's a green room where you can wait and warm up on a smaller piano." He led her backstage to the green room, which was already occupied by a few other nervous-looking performers. A young man was silently fingering violin positions. A middle-aged woman paged through sheet music, mouthing something to herself. They all looked up when Lily entered, offering small smiles of solidarity. "I'll leave you to prepare," David said. "Just remember what we talked about. Trust your instincts, trust the music." Alone among the other performers, Lily felt oddly calm. The weeks of preparation, the years of training before that, it was all inside her now. She flexed her fingers and sat at the small upright piano in the corner, playing a few quiet warm-up exercises. Time seemed to bend and stretch. The showcase began, and Lily listened as the first performers were announced and took the stage. Their music drifted back to the green room, a string quartet playing an experimental piece, a woodwind duo with an interesting folk-inspired composition. Lily Chen? She looked up to see a stagehand at the door. "You're on deck. This way, please." Lily followed her to the wings of the stage. From here, she could see part of the audience, a full house, she realized with a flutter of panic. David had mentioned that the showcase was popular, but she hadn't expected every seat to be filled. The current performer, a cellist, finished to enthusiastic applause. As he left the stage, he gave Lily an encouraging nod. "Next, we are pleased to present pianist and composer Lily Chen, performing her original work, After Silence," came the announcement. Lily hadn't even realized she'd given her piece a title until David had asked for it for the program. The name had come to her suddenly, After Silence, because that's what it was, the music that had come after years of keeping her gifts silent. She walked onto the stage, the spotlight momentarily blinding her. As her eyes adjusted, she caught glimpses of faces, Rita in the third row, beaming with pride, David sitting near the back, next to a distinguished-looking woman who must be Jane Thompson from the conservatory. The Steinway grand piano gleamed under the lights, its lid raised to project the sound. Lily sat down, adjusting the bench, and took a deep breath. In the moment of silence before she began, she thought of Mr. Zhang's wife, a pianist in China long ago. Of her father, who had saved for years to buy her first piano. Of all the paths that had led her here. Then she placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The opening notes were soft, hesitant, like the first drops of rain before a storm. Gradually, the melody built, gaining confidence and complexity. This was the story of her journey, translated into music. The loss, the struggle, the moments of beauty found in unexpected places. As she played, the world beyond the piano disappeared. There was only the music, her music flowing from her fingers, filling the space, touching each person in the audience in ways unique to them. This was why she had fallen in love with music as a child. This connection, this wordless communication that could express what language never could. The middle section grew more turbulent, with dissonant chords and challenging rhythms representing the conflicts and doubts she'd faced. Then came the resolution, not a simple happy ending, but something more nuanced. A kind of peace made more meaningful by the struggles that preceded it. When Lily played the final notes, a delicate ascending sequence that seemed to evaporate into the air, there was a moment of complete silence. She sat motionless, hands still hovering above the keys, heart pounding. Then came the applause, hesitant at first, then swelling until it filled the hall. Lily stood slightly dizzy and bowed. As she straightened, she saw that some people were standing. First just a few, then more, until most of the audience was on their feet. She caught Rita's eye and saw tears streaming down the older woman's face. David was applauding with unmistakable pride. And there, slipping in at the back of the hall, Mr. Zhang, who must have taken a bus to be here. Lily bowed once more and left the stage, her legs somehow carrying her despite feeling like jelly. In the green room, she collapsed into a chair, shaking with adrenaline and emotion. The rest of the showcase passed in a blur. When it ended, the performers gathered for a reception in the lobby where they could meet the audience and industry professionals. Lily found herself surrounded by people offering congratulations and questions. "That was extraordinary," said a woman who introduced herself as a music critic for the city paper. "Such emotional depth. How long have you been composing?" Before Lily could answer, another voice joined the conversation. "Ms. Chen has been developing her voice for years." It was Jane Thompson from Westridge Conservatory extending her hand. "David told me you were special, but I had no idea. We need to talk about your future plans." The next hour was a whirlwind of introductions and conversations. A recording executive gave her his card. A representative from a summer music festival invited her to apply as a featured composer. And Jane Thompson, after a long discussion about Lily's background and aspirations, made an offer that left her speechless. A full scholarship to complete her education at Westridge, with the option to begin in the winter term. "We have a new program for composers who also perform their own work," Jane explained. "Your piece today demonstrated exactly the kind of talent we're looking for." By the time the reception ended, Lily's head was spinning. she found Rita and Mr. Zhang waiting patiently near the exit, both beaming with pride. "So?" Rita asked. "What happens now?" Lily looked down at the collection of business cards and brochures in her hands, tangible proof that her music had been heard and valued. "Everything," she said. "Everything happens now." David approached, smiling. "I hate to say I told you so." Lily laughed. "No, you don't. You're right, I don't," he admitted. "You were magnificent today, Lily." "I couldn't have done it without your push," she said sincerely. "You saw something in me that I'd forgotten was there." 6 months later, Lily sat in a practice room at Westridge Conservatory, working on a new composition. Her life had transformed completely. With the scholarship covering her education and a part-time position as a piano teacher in the conservatory's community program, she'd been able to reduce her diner shifts to just weekends. Rita had thrown her a celebration dinner before her classes began. The diner decorated with balloons and a banner reading "Our Star Composer." Mr. Zhang had moved into a retirement community closer to his son, but Lily still visited him monthly, bringing recordings of her new pieces, and the music, it flowed more freely now. Each composition felt like another piece of herself rediscovered, another step on a path that had been waiting for her all along. She wasn't naive about the challenges ahead. The music world was still as competitive and difficult as it had always been. But now she faced it with something she'd lacked before: confidence in her own voice and the knowledge that her music deserved to be heard. As she played the final notes of her newest piece, Lily smiled to herself. The secret musician wasn't a secret anymore. She had stepped into the light where she belonged.